Hi everyone and welcome back. In this lesson, we will learn useful expressions we can use to talk about the weekend we just had. Let's begin with the model dialogue, and afterwards, we will explain everything in detail. How was your weekend? I had a busy weekend. How was yours? I went on a trip to Paris. Now, when we want to ask someone about the weekend they just had, we can ask this question. How was your weekend? How was your weekend? The key structure to this question is how was, and we use this question form to ask about the other person's past experience. So as well as someone's weekend, we can use this question form to ask about other past experiences. Here are a few other example questions. How was your holiday? How was your date? How was your Christmas? So as you can see, we can change your weekend with other noun phrases that relate to a certain experience and ask how that experience was. Let's practice asking these questions. How was your weekend? How was your holiday? How was your date? How was your Christmas? That was great, well done. Let's now take a look at a very common way of describing how our weekend was. I had a busy weekend. I had a busy weekend. Now, if we just want to give a general response of how our weekend was, we can say, I had a blank weekend. And in the blank, we can use various adjectives to describe how that weekend was. So we can say, I had a quiet weekend. I had a fun weekend. I had a terrible weekend. The adjective terrible means very bad. So as well as describing our weekend in a positive way, we can also describe our weekend as being very bad. Let's practice saying these sentences. I had a busy weekend. I had a quiet weekend. I had a fun weekend. I had a terrible weekend. That was great, well done. Next, the same question was asked back to the other person by asking, how was yours? And in this question, yours refers to your weekend. And in response to this question, the other person said this. I went on a trip to Paris. I went on a trip to Paris. The key language in this sentence is the past form of go on, went on. And when we talk about taking a trip to somewhere, we use the phrasal verb go on. The phrasal verb go on means to start an activity, and we use it to talk about going on trips and holidays. However, as well as travel activities, it can be used to talk about other things, such as workers going on strike and goods in shops going on sale. Go on is a transitive phrasal verb, meaning that it's always used with an object. And the object is always used after the phrasal verb go on. So it's always go on a trip and never go a trip on. Let's take a look at a few other example sentences. I went on holiday to Spain. I went on a business trip to Japan. I went on a cruise around Europe. In British English, we use the word holiday to talk about time we take away from work and go on a trip somewhere for fun. However, in American English, the word vacation is used. Okay, so let's now do a speaking practice of these sentences. I went on a trip to Paris. I went on holiday to Spain. I went on a business trip to Japan. I went on a cruise around Europe. Excellent job today. Well done. Let's listen to the whole dialogue again. How was your weekend? I had a busy weekend. How was yours? I went on a trip to Paris. Okay, so let's now do a speaking practice of this dialogue. We will do 2 speaking practices and all the lines will be on the screen. So when it's your turn, please read the lines and participate in the dialogue. Let's begin. How was your weekend? I went on a trip to Paris. I had a busy weekend. How was yours? Fantastic effort today. Well done. Okay, so in this lesson, we learned useful expressions we can use to talk about the weekend we just had. The next lesson is the speaking drill lesson, and I will see you soon again in the lesson after that. Bye bye.